Often overshadowed by the Caped Crusaders and billion-dollar cinematic universes that followed in its wake, Guillermo del Toro's sequel remains a vital, bloody cornerstone of the superhero genre. Blending horror with bone-shattering martial arts, techno-noir aesthetics, and pulpy comic book action with an auteur's eye for detail and mood, it is one of the most underrated films of the 21st century. Blade 2 is more than a stylish vampire action film. It is a hybrid beast of a movie, much like its protagonist. Half blockbuster, half horror opera, part studio-driven spectacle, part director-driven vision. Del Toro didn't just make a sequel, he forged a wholly unique, living, breathing world that expanded the Blade mythos and pushed the boundaries of what comic book adaptations could aspire to be in the pre-MCU, pre-Dark Knight era. When Blade 2 was released in 2002, X-Men had only just arrived in 2000. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man would release later that same year, and Nolan's Batman Begins was still about 3 years away. And yet here was a film that was already blending comic book mythology with European Gothic horror, drawing on Hong Kong action choreography, introducing cutting-edge creature design, and delivering philosophical meditations on identity, monstrosity, and sacrifice, all wrapped in a hyper-stylized package that didn't flinch from violence, grime, and blood-soaked spectacle.
Because when you read a comic book, you're never saying to yourself, oh, well, this is just all in good fun. You're entering into that universe. And that we're taking the exact same approach here.
And it gives us an opportunity to revitalize what we think is a good superhero and good representation of comic book films and some new flavor to the whole vampire genre at the same time.
At its core, Wesley Snipes delivers a terrific performance. His Blade is the epitome of stoic cool, a character balanced on the razor's edge between man and monster, eternally brooding, driven by duty, rage, and a fractured sense of humanity. Snipes doesn't just play Blade, he embodies him. He moves like a panther, fights with precision, and speaks only when necessary, but every word carries weight. But what truly elevates Blade 2 from a competent sequel is the touch of Guillermo del Toro. Known for his deep empathy for creatures and his obsession with monstrous beauty, Del Toro brings a painter's eye and a poet's heart to the material. His influence is immediately felt in the film's visual language: the shadow-drenched catacombs, the ancient vampire strongholds, the sickly green and amber hues of the sewers. Every frame oozes with atmosphere. Every set design feels like it has centuries of history behind it. Hey guys, what's happening? Nihat here with Film Comics Explained, and in this breakdown and review, we'll dive deep into every aspect of Blade 2, from its production, the Reaper virus, the narrative, its characters, the world building, to its revolutionary fight choreography and technical prowess. So sharpen your stakes, reload your UV rounds, and prepare to descend into the blood-drenched underworld.
And I knew there were certain things we wanted to do in this film that we hadn't done in the first film, that we wanted to make this film scarier. And I know that's something that Guillermo is incredibly good at. And he knew I was writing Blade 2, and I kept saying to him, when I'm done, we're going to be coming for you, we're going to be coming for you. And he said, yeah, but you know that I want to make it scarier, that's what I do. And we said, we know. We're going to have all the action that we did in the first film, but also this film is very scary.
Coming off the success of the original Blade in 1998, New Line Cinema recognized the potential of a burgeoning franchise. The first film, directed by Stephen Norrington and written by David S. Goyer, had been a hit, grossing over $130 million worldwide off a budget of $45 million, $70 million if we include marketing, proving that comic book adaptations could appeal to mature audiences. In many ways, Blade was the first modern Marvel movie, laying crucial groundwork for the superhero boom to come.
I was a fan of the comics he appeared on, but I was not a fan of the Blade character. You know, the Blade character in the comics was very, very boring visually and very predictable. I thought it was like a one-note, jive-talking, like Mod Squad type of character that was just like an African-American written by a white guy that really didn't understand the sensibility except through the Shaft movies he had seen. So I didn't relate to that. I thought Marv Wolfman wrote a great Dracula, but didn't write a great great Blade. And when I saw the movie, I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, someone got it, you know? And it was Norrington. Norrington got it, Wesley got it. I mean, I think that having worked with Wesley, I know how much of Wesley is in the first movie, and it's a lot. I mean, Wesley is.
David S. Goyer returned to write the sequel, but this time with a bigger canvas and a deeper mythology in mind. Goyer understood that Blade's story could not remain confined to a personal vendetta or city-level threats. The sequel needed to expand the universe and raise the stakes, while still maintaining the gritty tone of the first film. And so he envisioned a story that would place Blade in an uneasy alliance with enemies, the vampire elite, in order to combat a greater threat, a new breed of vampires.
There hadn't been a lot of good comic book movies made. There have been a lot of horrible films made, and I'm very proud of the fact that Blade is frequently cited as being one of the best comic book movies ever. And I think that the sequel, in almost every way, tops what we did in the first film.
But to bring this ambitious story to life, the studio needed a director with not only a strong visual style, but a passion for monsters, mythology, and action. At the time, Guillermo del Toro was best known for Cronos and Mimic, films that showcase his fascination with body horror, mythology, and sympathetic monsters. He'd also gained respect for his hands-on approach to creature effects, his stylized visual language, and his ability to inject pathos into horror. Del Toro was an inspired, albeit risky choice. He was not a traditional action director, nor a typical Hollywood journeyman, but that's exactly what made him perfect for Blade 2.
Both Goyer and I have been fans of Guillermo's since Cronos, and we were actually interested in him directing the first Blade.
Which would have been a catastrophe. You know, I think that going from Cronos to Blade 1 would have been like a shock therapy, because I think that Mimic has more things in common with Cronos in terms of atmosphere and so forth. Cronos to Mimic was a leap. Then Mimic to Devil's Backbone was like going back and finding my personality on certain things with the camera. And then Blade 2 was absolutely 100% just pure fun. Ready? Action! And I think that one of the things that I took very seriously doing Blade 2 was this was a chance for me to grow, quote unquote, as an artist. Blade 2 was a chance for me to grow enormously as a craftsman. And I took it in stride as an apprenticeship of really making myself get a whole new set of tools narratively.
Del Toro was a fan of the first film and immediately responded to the idea of turning Blade into a modern mythic hero, akin to a samurai, ronin, or gothic knight. He wanted to build upon the rules of the world that Goyer had created and add layers of ancient lore and visual flair. Crucially, he brought in his team of trusted collaborators, including concept artists, creature designers, and prosthetic experts who had worked with him since his early Mexican productions.
That's what was liberating in Blade 2, first of all, to direct someone else's screenplay, and number two, to be directing someone else's screenplay that we had agreed to not try to make real, but to try to make a comic book, and, you know, it was great.
His basic take on the movie, and I remember sitting with he and Wesley talking about it, the three of us for the first time, and how excited Wesley got and how excited I got, was to keep the movie as exciting and surprising as the first one, but to really make it scary. Because really, the first one wasn't scary.
Perhaps the most iconic contribution Del Toro made to Blade 2 was the creation of the Reapers that served as the primary antagonists. Rather than retread traditional vampire tropes, Del Toro designed something new, a creature that evolved parasitically, with a bi-jawed split mouth design inspired by insects and deep-sea creatures. Using practical effects and prosthetics wherever possible, Del Toro collaborated with Spectral Motion and Steve Johnson's XFX to bring the Reapers to life. Their design was not only terrifying but functional. They had translucent skin, exposed muscle tissue, and jaw structures that made sense anatomically. This tactile realism made them far more effective on screen than any early CGI monster could achieve.
It's when you get a director like Guillermo who just knows the techniques and he's not scared to use everything in his whole bag of tricks, you know, and he's not a director who just wants to do CG stuff just because it's the latest, greatest thing, you know. If it's gonna work to use like a sock puppet or something, you know, in the back, he'll do that, and it's great, and he benefits from it, and you come up with a better product.
The CG that they're using for my character particularly, it's just like you think, wow, this is an unbelievable amount of work, and the expense and the kind of just the effort that's gone into these puppets, and the whole kind of behind the scenes thing is fascinating.
Del Toro insisted on filming in Prague, a city whose Baroque architecture and foggy alleys gave Blade 2 a timeless, otherworldly feel. This grounded the film in a quasi-European Gothic setting that felt both ancient and futuristic, a departure from the more urban, techno-club feel of the original. Prague's underground tunnels, stone cathedrals, and decaying industrial zones perfectly matched the film's tone, claustrophobic, haunted, and drenched in shadow. Filming in Eastern Europe also allowed the production to stretch the budget further, investing in set design, creature effects, and elaborate fight sequences. Del Toro utilized real locations as much as possible, avoiding green screen when he could, in order to immerse the audience in the physical reality of Blade's world.
One of the reasons why we came to Prague is because there were so many sets built for this film. It would have been A, too cost prohibitive to do it in the States, but B, the artisans in Eastern Europe are so amazing. I mean, that's one of the reasons you come to Eastern Europe if you have a movie that has a lot in terms of sets.
I really enjoy the craftsmanship. The craftsmanship that they bring to sets, for example, is very, very old world. You know, the precision and the pride that they bring to their craftsmanship in creating statues, murals, stuff like that is just really amazing. And it shows in the movie for me.
Of course, Wesley Snipes returned as the lead, a producer and creative influence. The Blood Pack, on the other hand, brought in a fresh ensemble of talent. Ron Perlman, a Del Toro regular, played the antagonistic Reinhardt. Donnie Yen, the legendary Hong Kong action star, joined the cast as Snowman and also served as the fight choreographer. And Norman Reedus, years before The Walking Dead, played Scud, Blade's snarky new tech support. Every member of the Blood Pack had a distinct look, fighting style, and attitude, offering Del Toro the chance to explore ensemble dynamics.
It's all about the emotion of a character. He could be expressing himself in a very still emotional way, or he can express himself in a very physical way.
If I can pick this bottle up over here, I'm gonna bottle you to death.
It all comes from within, so therefore, Wesley, as Blade, he has his own unique character. So every move, punch and kicks comes from Wesley Snipes playing Blade.
He uses whatever he can, he doesn't care.
By all means, that is originality. So therefore, he should go ahead and continue to maintain that
street style.
That uniqueness.
It's not acrobatic, it's more street. It's very violent, very direct and hard punching.
Blade's system of fighting is kind of whatever works.
He has his own little flavor, and I respect that, I appreciate that. I actually don't think you should always follow the set pattern of a choreographer or a director.
It's I'm gonna hit you with this, I'm gonna stab you with that, I'm gonna cut you with that.
So exciting.
One of Blade 2's most celebrated aspects is its kinetic, beautifully choreographed action. With Donnie Yen on board, the martial arts took a leap forward. Yen infused Eastern fighting styles with cinematic flair, focusing on fluidity, rapid combinations, and stylized brutality. Del Toro worked closely with Yen to shoot the fights with clarity, emphasizing long takes and minimal shaky cam.
We did some stuff with the L-cam, which means liberated camera, and fusing some digital manipulation of the stuff with the real stunt. And we go with some of the actions to places and following the characters in ways that a normal camera would not do. And the fusion seems very good to me.
While practical effects were prioritized, Blade 2 also employed digital effects for enhancements. Del Toro oversaw the integration of CGI carefully, using it to augment stunts, simulate impossible camera movements, and enhance creature transformations. The film also experimented with digital stunt doubles during some high-speed fights. More importantly, Del Toro used stylization as a shield, embracing a slightly exaggerated comic book feel to lean into the film's pulpy, graphic novel tone.
We started doing basic concepts from my drawings and then turned them into more elaborate costume designs.
Because it morphed through several different stages, and that probably took about 2 months of sketching. There were many, many sketches that were done that we never used, where it gave the director an opportunity to see it coming to life and seeing the whole thing becoming a living comic book.
The score was a hybrid affair, with Marco Beltrami's orchestral arrangements fused with electronic tracks curated by Danny Saber and various hip-hop and techno producers. The result was a gritty, industrial, yet epic soundscape that gave the film an operatic pulse.
One thing about horror genre or this type of stuff is that you don't have to worry about subtlety. You can just, it's an element, but you can kind of really have fun playing with timbre and sound and rhythm, and you can make your score bombastic. And from a compositional standpoint, it's a lot of fun because that's the type of stuff when you're trained 20th century music and everything. It's really sound exploration.
The production was a tightrope walk, and yet Del Toro pulled it off with flair. The result was a sequel that expanded the world, deepened the lore, and delivered one of the most visually rich and thematically ambitious comic book films of its era. For Guillermo del Toro, it was a stepping stone to Hellboy and Pan's Labyrinth. For comic book movies, it was proof that sequels could be more than just bigger. They could be bolder. The prologue unfolds in Prague, and we follow a man, gaunt and coughing, as he stumbles into a blood bank. His name, though we don't know it yet, is Jared Nomak, and his appearance evokes the iconography of sickness and desperation. A figure clad in a hoodie, twitching, muttering, a man who looks more like a junkie than a predator. And that's precisely the deception, because Nomak isn't a victim, he's the future. The blood bank turns out to be a front for vampires harvesting humans, a great bit of world building that leans into systemic horror, and the tone is unsettling. From the cold off-white lighting of the clinic to the casual cruelty of the vampire staff, Del Toro wastes no time recontextualizing the vampire threat. These aren't just nightclubbers with fangs, they're an organized global aristocracy, parasites posing as caretakers.
First time giving blood? Yes. They pay cash here. They even buy it in the jar.
But Nomak turns the tables on his would-be predators, unveiling a jaw that splits open like a demonic flower. The kills are brutal. It's not clean and it's not sexy. It's wet, monstrous, and entirely inhuman. In just a few minutes, Del Toro introduces his thesis. Vampires aren't the top of the food chain anymore. When Blade finally appears, he does so as a ghost from legend, roaring through the rain-drenched alleys of Prague, sunglasses gleaming beneath a midnight sky. It's a perfect contrast. Where Nomak is a mystery cloaked in decay, Blade is myth made flesh. Snipes is magnetic from the moment he steps on screen, all coiled efficiency and controlled rage. There's no reintroduction speech, no redundant exposition. His entrance tells us everything. The hunt is still on, and he hasn't lost his bite. Blade doesn't fight so much as dismantle. The choreography, enhanced by Donnie Yen, is crisp, fluid, and brutal. Blades clash, bodies are shattered and turned to ash. The setting is industrial, grimy, filled with corrugated steel and low-lit tunnels, evoking an Eastern European post-industrial nightmare. But beneath the action lies character. Blade isn't hunting just any vampire. He's searching for his lost mentor, Abraham Whistler, the grizzled, shotgun-toting sidekick from the first film. Blade's determination to recover Whistler isn't just loyalty, it's obsession, a refusal to let go of the only human tether he had left. When Blade finally infiltrates the lab where he's being held, the film doubles down on its fusion of body horror and cyberpunk aesthetics. The lab is a maze of surgical steel and glowing tanks, with the Whistler suspended in fluids. This act of reclamation, Blade pulling his mentor's broken body from the container, is as much a statement of resistance as it is salvation. He's effectively pulling a man back from the mouth of hell.
Old man, look at what they've done to you.
In Blade's new base of operations, we're introduced to a new character, Scud, played by Norman Reedus, whose slacker meets mechanic vibe clashes hilariously with Whistler's grizzled cowboy energy. Scud is young, tech-savvy, and irreverent, but rather than feeling like a replacement, Scud comes across as a stopgap. He's part of Blade's world, but doesn't truly belong in it. Reedus plays him with enough charm and edge to be likable, but there's a faint layer of insincerity baked into his presence, a subtle hint at where his loyalties might lie, and something that becomes more evident on rewatch.
A little toke of the smoke at JB.
Later.
This shit ain't gonna work, man. I see you kill a motherfucker right now.
Get out.
Once cured, Whistler returns to the team, more skeptical, more cynical, but still the grounding force that Blade needs. The triangle between Blade, Whistler, and Scud is an elegant character dynamic. You have the soldier, Blade, the father, Whistler, and the apprentice, Scud. And the film toys with trust and betrayal from the moment that all three are in the room.
Where'd you dig up this shitbird anyway?
The f***'s your problem?
It's also worth noting the base itself, a dim, analog-feeling bunker full of weapons and tech. It looks like a vampire hunter's weaponry workshop, where science and superstition coexist. Del Toro shoots it like a place of worship, where the task of extermination is carried out with a ritualistic precision.
Listen to me, Blade.
Just when it looks like the film is settling into a familiar rhythm, it breaks the pattern. Blade's hideout is breached by envoys. Two masked vampire ninjas arrive not to kill him, but to offer a truce as the vampire elite want Blade's help. Something new has arisen, something they can't control. It's the moment the film expands from personal vendetta to existential apocalypse.
You have been our most feared enemy, but now there's something else loose on the streets.
This revelation sends Blade to the heart of the vampire world, a fortress deep within the city's forgotten bones. Here he meets Damascanos, the ancient vampire overlord, more corpse than king, whose very appearance conjures Nosferatu.
Yes.
He speaks of the Reaper strain, a mutation of vampirism that turns its hosts into uncontrollable feeders immune to traditional vampire weaknesses. It is, in effect, a plague, one that threatens to topple the vampire aristocracy itself, and Blade is the only one equipped to stop it.
There'll be hundreds before the week's out, thousands within a matter of months.
Blade agrees reluctantly, and thus the film introduces the Blood Pack, a team of elite vampire warriors originally assembled to kill him. Now they must ironically fight alongside him. Their introduction is stylized and each member is a type. The Brute, the Silent Swordsman, the Femme Fatale, the Snarling Xenophobe. But the standout is Reinhardt, played with a gleeful menace by Ron Perlman. His seething contempt for Blade and laced petty jabs makes him an instant antagonist. But Blade responds not with anger, but with strategy, planting a tiny explosive on his head.
Silver nitrate, rigged to go off if anybody tampers with it. From now on, we work as a unit. You'll be taking orders from me.
The Blood Pack have been tasked with hunting the Reapers, and intel suggests that the infected are hiding in the sewer tunnels beneath the city. The setting is no accident. Del Toro shoots the descent into the sewers with weight. This isn't just a tactical incursion, it's a descent into hell. The deeper they go, the more the film transforms. The colors shift from amber and steel to green, brown, and rot. The walls sweat, the air thickens, and the aesthetic turns from urban gothic to biological horror. The first encounter with the Reapers unfolds with blistering violence at a feeding club. The split-jawed creatures lunge from the shadows with speed, and the Blood Pack quickly realize they're outmatched. These things don't burn from UV light instantly, and silver and garlic barely slow them down. What's brilliant about this fight is not just the choreography, but the way it's used to expose character. The Blood Pack isn't a team, they're a collection of egos, each fighting with their own agenda. Some are reckless, some like Snowman are extremely skilled, while others are simply cruel. Lighthammer ends up getting infected mid-fight, though he hides the wound, and that decision ripples throughout the rest of the movie like a virus. Blade, by contrast, is a surgical instrument, but even he's taken back by Nomac's resilience. For the first time in a long while, Blade may not be the apex predator in the room, and Snipes plays this subtly. He doesn't panic, but his eyes narrow, his movements tighten, and he recalibrates, using sunlight to make his enemy flee. After capturing a Reaper, Nisa and Blade examine its body in detail. The camera lingers on the translucent flesh, the pulsating organs, and the overprotected heart. This scene is where Del Toro's love for biological realism shines. The Reapers aren't just monsters, they're plausible evolutionary offshoots. Their physiology makes sense. Their mouths aren't just scary, they're mechanically functional. Even Blade, a character so used to violence and horror, seems quietly disturbed by what he's seeing.
Pull a leg off a spider, it keeps moving on its own.
Here, Nisa and Blade share a moment of connection. Two beings trapped between worlds, both repulsed and fascinated by what they're dissecting. There's a tenderness in her questions and a guarded respect in Blade's answers. Their chemistry simmers. Nyssa, the daughter of Damascanos, is perhaps the first vampire Blade doesn't despise, and that discomfort is written all over Snipes' performance.
Remember to protect yourselves at all times. Nyssa, just remember to take cover.
As the Blood Pack regroups, paranoia festers. When they track the Reapers in the tunnels, the second major action sequence unfolds, this time more chaotic, more desperate. The sewers become a labyrinth of ambushes and screams. Chupa is devoured after turning on Whistler, Lighthammer turns, feeding on Snowman, and Verlaine, attempting to get away, ends up burning them both to dust via sunlight. And then comes the double cross. After putting himself in harm's way to protect Nyssa, Blade is betrayed and captured by Damascanos. Nomak also spares Whistler and tells him the truth about his origins. Here it's revealed that the Reaper strain wasn't a curse or the result of natural evolution. It was designed. Nomak was Damascanos' own child and a failed experiment, a genetically engineered Daywalker prototype.
I've struggled to rid our kind of any weaknesses, but in time, there'll be a new, pure race.
The Reaper strain is a radical, weaponized deviation from traditional vampirism. Where standard vampires in this world are already predatory, seductive, and resilient, the Reapers are what happens when science forcibly advances nature without caution or conscience. Designed to eliminate vampiric weaknesses through genetic manipulation, this strain was a deliberately engineered plague. Damascanos initiated the project with one objective: to create a new breed of vampire immune to traditional vulnerabilities, sunlight, garlic, silver, and capable of dominating both humans and lesser vampires alike. In essence, he sought to produce a perfected race that could surpass even the Daywalker, but the results were catastrophic. While the Reaper strain succeeded in enhancing vampire physiology, it also rendered the infectious monstrous, feral, and biologically unstable. It removed several traditional weaknesses, granting immunity to silver, garlic, and even the potent anticoagulant EDTA, but in doing so, it amplified the downsides of the vampire condition to uncontrollable extremes. Reapers are consumed by a relentless, biologically driven bloodlust, forced to feed every few hours.
You've got to understand, these things are like crack addicts. They need to feed daily.
Unlike traditional vampires, Reapers are ghastly in appearance. They possess a greyish pallor, elongated claws and fangs, little to no hair, and a signature scar stretching from the lower lip to the base of the neck. The scar conceals their most terrifying trait, a bifurcated jaw that splits open. When feeding, this lower jaw separates, exposing a proboscis-like tongue designed for blood-sucking. Their tongue, while terrifying, is a marvel of evolutionary design. It is muscular, retractable, and supported by overdeveloped bifurcated masseter muscles that allow the Reaper to bite with tremendous force, easily breaking through human flesh. The split jaw also contains retractable hollow fangs, which function similarly to those of venomous snakes, delivering a paralytic neurotoxin into the victim to immobilize them during feeding. Once subdued, the proboscis punctures an artery, siphoning blood while simultaneously infecting the host.
It is injected through these barbs.
The Reaper's physiology is further enhanced by extreme regenerative capabilities. They're able to recover from gunshots, stabbings, broken bones, and other trauma in seconds, often continuing to fight at full strength after sustaining injuries that would cripple or kill a regular vampire. This regeneration is directly linked to their feeding cycle. The more frequently they feed, the faster and more complete their cellular recovery is. Their hearts are heavily protected, encased in bone-like exoskeletal armor on both front and back, making traditional staking nearly impossible. This armor forces attackers to impale from the sides, a difficult and impractical angle during combat. Even the typical vampire-slaying chemicals such as EDTA are ineffective against them. While ordinary vampires explode when injected with it, the Reapers experience only momentary discomfort. Nomak, for example, the original Reaper and alpha carrier of the strain, is shown shrugging off chemical assaults with minimal reaction. What's noticeable is that the Reapers are also highly agile and physically overpowering. They can scale walls and ceilings with spider-like ease, leap extraordinary distances, and move faster than the human eye can track. They rely on both brute strength and pack coordination, often hunting in groups to overwhelm prey. Though most Reapers lose their capacity for speech due to the virus's cognitive degradation, they retain enough intelligence to coordinate ambushes, lay traps and follow orders, especially those given by Nomak, their alpha. A peculiar feature found in their physiology is a set of gill-like slits on their backs near the shoulder blades. These appear to function as sensory or pheromone-based organs. During feeding, these gills open, possibly to excrete chemical signals or pheromones that alert nearby Reapers to converge on a feeding site. This behavior turns each kill into a beacon for others, accelerating the swarm effect and making isolated feeding nearly impossible to contain. Visually, their demise differs from traditional vampires. Upon exposure to sunlight or ultraviolet rays, Reapers combust violently, but unlike the yellow-orange flame seen in vampire deaths, Reapers ignite into cold blue fire. The intensity of their combustion further illustrates their unstable molecular composition and hints at a deeper vulnerability to UV radiation. Of course, sunlight remains their primary weakness, though even here, their threshold for exposure is marginally higher than their predecessors. Despite their monstrous strength and regenerative powers, Reapers have a critical systemic weakness. Their metabolism is so hyperactive that it cannot sustain itself. They must feed constantly to maintain homeostasis. Once deprived, they begin deteriorating rapidly, with their own tissues cannibalizing themselves to sustain the brain and nervous system. This degeneration is so aggressive that even after brain death, the Reaper's body continues attempting to feed reflexively, mimicking the twitching, post-mortem spasms of severely diseased or nerve-damaged organisms. Jared Nomak, as the original Reaper and the only one capable of speech and complex reasoning, stands apart. He retains much of his humanity, though his pain and rage are barely contained beneath the surface. Nomak was created by Damascanos as the prototype of the Reaper strain. His intelligence, control, and ability to command the infected mark him as the alpha of the species. While others become mindless feeding machines, Nomak remains sentient, strategic, and ultimately self-aware.
Why kill me? We have the same enemy. We want the same thing.
In the cold, sterile halls of the vampire fortress, Blade is beaten and strapped to a surgical gurney, drained of his blood to find the key to creating Daywalkers. Watching him slowly weaken in this cold chamber is painful, not just because we care about him as a character, but because the violation is almost metaphysical. His war, his pain, his code, reduced to an experiment by an empire of soulless immortals.
We're going to harvest your blood, every drop of it.
But Del Toro gives Blade his resurrection. Nomak arrives and gives Whistler the distraction he needs to storm in like a one-man rebellion and free his fallen friend. There's something fabled in this moment, not just father saving son, but humanity rescuing the hybrid it once feared. Blade, barely conscious, then drags himself to the nearest blood pool and collapses. What follows is the rebirth of the Daywalker. The subsequent massacre is a ballet of brutality. Del Toro and Snipes treat the scene not as a simple revenge beat, but as a declaration. Blade, now re-empowered, is efficiency incarnate. He storms through like a scythe cutting through wheat, tearing down guards, breaking bones, snapping necks and hurling bodies. The camera lingers on his footwork, his weapon transitions, the grim focus in his eyes. It's an underrated fight sequence because it strips away the flash and gives us fury. Meanwhile, Nisa, increasingly disillusioned with her father, begins to see the full depth of his depravity. The emotional current running through her arc is subtle but potent. She was loyal to a bloodline that sees her as dispensable.
Reset the security code. We're locked in.
The final confrontation with Damascanos brings the thematic knife full circle when he's revealed to be an absolute coward. As Nomak arrives and confronts his father, the emotional resonance is unmistakable. Here is the creature cast into darkness, standing before the father who made him a pariah. Damascanos tries to rationalize, but Nomak doesn't want redemption. He doesn't even want revenge, he wants the truth. And when it becomes clear that he was created out of vanity and discarded out of fear, he slaughters his maker without mercy. The final battle between Blade and Nomak is the climax we've been building toward, not just physically, but philosophically. Both men are hybrids, both despise what they are, both are warriors. But where Blade has discipline and empathy, Nomak is rage incarnate. After feeding on his sister Nisa, who Blade has grown to care for, the prince gives the Daywalker no choice but to eliminate him. Their duel here is a masterclass in choreography and tension. The camera dances around two beings caught between evolution and extinction, tearing each other apart because neither can afford to exist while the other survives. Nomak's death is operatic, not a desperate struggle, but a self-inflicted end. After a long, grueling battle, Blade stabs him, but Nomak, exhausted, bloodied and resolute, finishes the act himself, driving the weapon deeper into his heavily protected heart. The emotional final beat comes not with Blade, but with Nisa. Mortally wounded by her brother, she asks Blade to take her to the rooftop. She wants to see the sunrise, and so he carries her gently, laying her down beneath the rising sun. There's no kiss, just silence, respect, a touch of grief, and when the sun consumes her, turning her to dust in his arms, Blade doesn't flinch.
Blood ties mean nothing to me.
You die not by the hand of your enemy, but by that of your own children.
It's strange. It hurts no more.
Blade has won, but not without cost. Whistler limps back to their bunker. Scud is revealed to have been a traitor and has already been dealt with. The Blood Pack is gone. Damascus is dead, the Reapers are now extinct, and Blade, for all his strength, walks away alone. Again. We then cut to the final scene, where Blade tracks down a vampire who'd escaped earlier and kills him.
Well, you didn't think I forgot about you, did you?
And I wanted on Blade 2 to take a very unique biological approach. If the romantic vampire in the popular imagination right now is sort of Tom Cruise in Interview with the Vampire, this time I wanted to revert more to the animal. I wanted these vampires to be more like leeches, to be more like just a thing that is there to take your blood and that's it. There's no erotic exchange, there's no subtext. It's just like they just want to drain you. They're not giving you the keys of eternity. They're not giving you nights in the moonlight. They just want to suck you dry.
At the heart of Blade 2 lies a simple yet potent escalation. What happens when the predator becomes prey? The premise is elegant in its symmetry and subversion. Blade, once a scourge of vampires, now must defend them to protect the greater balance. The script by David S. Goyer is surprisingly layered. On its surface, it's a monster movie, but beneath the action lies a meditation on identity, loyalty, mutation, and the corruption of power. The story threads, Blade's search for his mentor, his tense alliance with the Blood Pack, the mystery of the Reaper virus, and the eventual revelation of a greater betrayal, all interweave with a thematic cohesiveness rarely found in comic book adaptations of that era. This isn't just about bloodshed, it's about legacy, manipulation, and the tragedy of being born a weapon.
He's a very, very alienated, dark character who's got some scores to settle, you know, within the context of being half man, half vampire, and hating suckheads, as he calls them. But it's all deadly serious. And I think that's what kind of sets it apart.
Wesley Snipes delivers what may be his most iconic performance. His portrayal of Blade is physical, minimalist, and epic. He plays a daywalker like a wandering samurai, stoic, disciplined, but with a deep-seated pain just beneath the surface. Snipes' martial arts training and choreography input add authenticity to every moment. He doesn't fight like a choreographed hero, he fights like a man who spent years perfecting the kill.
I tend to gravitate towards anti-heroes. I'm doing another project now, Ghost Rider, also a Marvel comic, and I tend to enjoy writing characters that are shades of gray, and I loved all the Clint Eastwood films, The Man with No Name, and I don't regard Blade as being a superhero per se. He's a deeply tortured character. He hates himself, and by extension he hates the vampires, and I tend to think that those characters, at least for me, are more interesting to write.
Chris Christopherson's return as Whistler is gruff, soulful, and mournful. Where the first film used him as a hard-edged mentor, Blade 2 gives him more emotional depth. His resurrection could have been a lazy plot device, but instead it's used to deepen his bond with Blade, and adds another father-son layer to the film's meditation on bloodlines.
Blade is a character that sees the world in black and white. I'm not saying it's morally right or wrong, and I think that Blade is that type of character. It's a character that has a very small dramatic arc, very small. You know, you don't see Blade come out at the end of the movie and say, "I shall embrace all forms of life." You know, that's not what is that character about, and that's part of the comic book mythology.
The supporting cast elevates what could have been tropey archetypes into memorable figures. Ron Perlman's Reinhard is all sneering arrogance and latent bigotry, the kind of snarling antagonist you love to hate. Norman Reedus brings punk energy to Scud, blending comic relief with simmering duplicity. Leonor Varela's Nisa is a standout, dignified, tragic, and quietly disillusioned. Her arc mirrors Blade's in reverse, from loyal vampire to sympathetic outcast, and her death under the sun gives the film its mournful closure.
I remember recently showing some of the footage to some friends, and I hadn't prepared them for what they were going to see. And the women literally were screaming just seeing the raw footage. So I know I can't wait to be in the first preview of this movie and the audience to watch them freak out when it happens. I mean, it's going to be amazing.
Luke Goss's Jared Nomak is perhaps the film's most inspired casting. His portrayal of the Reaper leader is magnetic. Nomak is monstrous, yes, but also tragic, a product of genetic engineering, discarded by his creator. Goss imbues the role with pathos, ferocity, and grace. He's not just a monster, he's a dark reflection of Blade himself.
Guillermo does a lot of drawings, and I do little sketches as well. And Guillermo and myself, we always had kind of a vision in our heads of what these Reapers would look like.
Well, the Reapers originally on David's were like shape-shifting creatures, meaning they essentially could change into anything in order to get to your blood reservoir, you know? And then what I wanted to do is just have them do one single change, but make them organically, internally, completely different from vampires.
Guillermo del Toro's direction is what elevates Blade 2 into something extraordinary. From the moment the film opens in the damp, grimy corridors of a vampire-run blood bank, it's clear we're in his world, one where architecture breathes, shadows stretch, and monsters are both horrific and deeply tragic.
So the CG animated mo allows you for bigger freedom in the movement.
But the one thing that you do benefit with puppets that you really have a hard time with computer is the physicality of the material.
We always wanted to combine them, but we wanted to combine them. Ultimately, we mix and match, and we did some of each in both cases. And I think that if you combine techniques, if you use physical and CG, and make the CG as good as you can to make it physical, and make the physical as fluid as you can to make it look like CG, then the eye of the audience goes, how did he do that? And the moment they don't know, they believe. And remember, faith is only hopeful ignorance.
Del Toro also doesn't just shoot action, he composes it. Fights are tense and precise. His camera moves with intention, often gliding through hallways, lingering on twisted anatomy, or framing combat like religious ritual. I also love how the film is full of gothic grandeur. Vampire strongholds carved into ancient cathedrals, surgical labs that feel more like sacrificial chambers, and sewers that drip with the bile of evolutionary ruin. But more than anything, Del Toro brings empathy to monsters. He makes you look at the Reapers not just with fear, but with pity. He gives Nomak soulful eyes and lets him die on his own terms. He crafts horror not for cheap thrills, but to explore the idea that what is grotesque can also be melancholic.
I asked New Line for every single piece of film shot by Norrington on the first one. And I went in and I watched, I saw every single piece of raw dailies in that movie. Everyone, all the takes. And then I analyzed the movie. And then I said, this is what I don't want to do with it. This is what I'm going to preserve because I wanted to give it continuity. And after analyzing every single piece of dailies, I knew what the style of the fight was, and I knew how to amp it up one step or two, how to make it the logical evolution of what Norrington had proposed on that one. And I wanted very hard to serve the franchise.
Director of photography Gabriel Bernstein paints the film in sickly greens, rusted golds, and deep shadows. The color palette reflects decay and transformation. Nothing is clean, nothing untouched by rot. Even Blade's iconic black leather seems darker in this film, swallowed by the environments he moves through.
The whole production design in this movie wanted to evoke very fantastic sets. You know, if it's the Damaskinos cryogenics chamber or the DNA chamber, whatever, it was almost like a James Bond on acid type of set, you know? And if it is Damaskinos' lair, we had Mike Mignola design it or have conceptuals for it to give it a comic book feeling. And there are some images in the movie that are completely like Mike Mignola inspired. They seem right out of the Hellboy comic.
The production design in Blade 2 is astonishing. From the bloodletting chambers to the sewer layers of the Reapers, every set feels lived in, weathered and meaningful. The vampire citadel is all stone and glass, a blend of ancient tradition and cold futurism. Del Toro also does a good job of populating his world with a lot of detail. There's runes, sigils, half-forgotten glyphs etched into walls, giving the impression that this universe has been bleeding for centuries before we arrived.
I usually don't like to work on the movie too early because start working from script, it's really deceiving. We're not making music for a screenplay. And especially in a movie like this, which is so stylized, reading the script, I had no idea the movie would look the way it does. And if I had written the music based on the script, it'd be a different score.
The sound design is layered and brutal. Every bite, every snap of bone, every blade slicing flesh is mixed to visceral effect. The Reaper's hiss is insectile, unnatural, and yet somehow sorrowful, a brilliant design choice that makes them feel alien yet sentient. The score by Marco Beltrami is a fusion of classic orchestration and electronic menace. It shifts from pounding industrial drums during the fight scenes to melancholic strings during the quieter, reflective moments. It's an aggressive but emotionally textured score that gives Blade 2 a sense of mythological urgency, as though it's chronicling a battle already etched in some long-forgotten scripture.
There was a really neat moment when Peter Frankfurt and I, the other producer, first came to Prague, where Wesley had his first costume fitting. And it had been 4 years since he played the character. And he put on the costume this time, and he buckled up the harness, and he put on the coat, and he drew out the blade. And it had been 4 years since he'd done it, and he drew it out, and it was just Wesley and Peter Frankfurt and the costumer and myself in the room, and he drew out the blade, and he looked in the mirror and said, "Oh yeah, I'm back." And it was just such a great moment 4 years later. It was really fun.
While Blade 2 uses CGI sparingly, and some digital shots have aged, the vast majority of its creature effects and stunts are practical. The Reapers, created with prosthetics and animatronics, are grotesque marvels. Their mandibles open with eerie realism, thanks to a blend of puppetry and subtle VFX augmentation.
This undulates, it latches on, and then you see the bladders move.
It kind of, even our hero.
One of the things they kept talking about was very young, hip-looking, but then going in with the blood bank scene, kind of hip, edgy, strung-out, druggy sort of thing. Kind of like that androgynous, thin, bald. You can imagine the body-piercing thing. So it needed to be very hip and on the edge. We then did a series of clay maquettes where we sculpt out the Reaper open maw concept, and we would sculpt out in full size in clay every stage of a Reaper open maw, from just the little scar to opening a little bit more, to opening more, to the full pullback. And then bring Guillermo in and have discussions, what we want the interior of the maw to look like, how we want all of this stuff to happen.
Blade 2 is ultimately a gothic horror opera masquerading as an action film, directed by one of cinema's greatest monster makers and anchored by one of the most iconic performances in superhero history. It combines martial arts spectacle with philosophical weight, creature feature horror with tragic character arcs, and stylish visual excess with narrative precision. In an age way before the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Blade 2 proved that superhero stories could be dark, violent, and deeply personal.
It has not only the whole horror dynamic, it has comedy as well. It looks great. This one is going to look even more beautiful than the first one. And then it has this whole martial arts stylized and sometimes vicious action dynamic, which you don't usually find all of this in one film.
And he would come up with absolutely really great ideas. And he's a guy that is, aside from everything, he has one thing in common with me. We are both fans.
It's better to work with a director who is a fan of action genres than not, because then you can explain things to him and he'll get it quicker.
Wesley listens to everybody's ideas, the two choreographers, the visual stuff I want to do, and then he does what I call, he brings the bladeness in.
We call it keeping it funky.
Every time you would, for example, propose a move, he would say, that's not a blade way to do it. What if we do this?
It's got to be funky.